You hear a lot of conversation going around talking about Native Americans, American Indians, that, they were peaceful people. They were one with nature. They didn't really own land. They just lived in nature. And the white people just came over and took everything they had, which, as someone who comes from a tribalistic culture, you see right through that stuff. You see that there is a facade that the media likes to paint to make one people seem more peaceful than the other, just to create a villain. In every era, there's a villain, and the villain has to be painted a villain, even if it opposes history. So Matt Walsh did this video, and I thought it was very interesting. He basically went in on the American Indians and just laid out their history flat out, so you guys get an idea of what it is that media lies to you about when it says we took land from people. It's actually kind of crazy, because they weren't peaceful at all. They were tribalistic, just like any human who's tribalistic would do certain things.
Another pervasive myth about Native Americans combines two contradictory ideas into one. Native Americans had no concept of property rights, particularly over land, and that Europeans stole the land from them. Well, obviously, these two claims cannot both be true. If the Indians truly lacked any notion of property rights, then the land, by definition, could not have been stolen from them, because theft implies the violation of rightful ownership. Yet the same narrative often asserts both points simultaneously without recognizing the logical contradiction. This inconsistency reveals a deeper issue. The first claim is frequently used to justify displacement by portraying native land used as primitive or communal in a way that didn't count as real ownership under European legal standards. The second claim, meanwhile, appeals to modern moral sensibilities about injustice. Holding both ideas at once allows the narrative to shift between them depending on the argument being made.
You see, this is the interesting thing about what he's saying. When we're talking about the advancement of morality, a lot of the times people will say stuff like this, where they say, oh, what they did back then was evil based on what we know now, which that's always a problem if you're using knowledge acquired later to judge the people back then who weren't operating on that knowledge. Am I wrong?
Yeah, because things develop, things change, perspectives are different. And now we go back to the conversation of subjective morality, and what they thought was good at that time, we might not think is good at this time. So exactly. Different minds, different. Yeah. So it does make sense when you have two different time period mindsets, you're going to disagree.
Yeah. So it's crazy whenever people offer up that kind of argument, like it's going to solve the problem. No. You have to understand, you're now coming to that conclusion. And based on the history of the American Indians and everything he's going to lay out before us, you'll find that they simply just lost a war. Many people have lost wars. The tribe that I come from, the whole country, it's there because certain people lost a battle. That's just how humans settle things before. It's a modern day type of thing where we're like, okay, this place belongs to these people, and it's recognized all over the world that this place belongs to these people. But even now, you'll find that the war still goes on. Like if you look at Nigeria, Muslims are warring against Christian Nigerians and Nigerians in general. They're actually starting to take over Nigeria. They're moving from the north and conquering as they move down to the south in Nigeria. War isn't gone. This is how people obtain and gain land and gain control and power. So this isn't even anything new. People just like to act like the era that we're in, where there's no war, there's no real conflict to the extent that, this city is having a war next to us, or this nation is going to come and invade us. We have to set up barricades and all these things. We don't live in that time anymore. So all of that concept is lost on people, and people like to judge past historical events based on the peacefulness that we have now, which it's apples and oranges, man. You just can't compare.
Avoiding the underlying.
This part right here, where he talks about what they were doing to each other.
Radical college professors were rewriting history to create the myth of the peaceful Indian. Others were willing to acknowledge Native American violence, but blame that on white people. In 1969, an Indian author and activist named Vine Deloria argued that scalping was introduced prior to the French and Indian War by the English, framing it as a European invention that confirmed suspicions of Indians as wild animals to be hunted and skinned. Well, in fact, scalping was one of the many ancient traditions meant to cripple victims in the afterlife. As Lawrence Keeley notes, the custom of scalping enemy dead was observed at first contact among tribes ranging from New England to California and from parts of the subarctic down to northern Mexico. Scalps and scalping were embedded in the myth and rituals of so many tribes that the custom's indigenous roots in North America are beyond serious question. Defiling an enemy's body supposedly denied them a place in the afterlife. It was humiliating. This photo shows the corpse of a U.S. cavalryman killed and mutilated by the Southern Cheyenne in 1867.
I guess we can't.
Tribes in Colombia kept the entire skins of their dead enemies.
Dang.
Some tribes turned their enemies' bones into flutes. Women commonly flayed the victims, and at least one tribe treated their victims like we treat trophy bucks. They had them stuffed, waxed, and prominently placed in their homes. Different Plains tribes mutilated their foes' corpses in different ways, and their traditions went back centuries. Anthropologists working the site of the Crow Creek Massacre, which happened in the mid-1400s in central South Dakota, found mutilated skeletons. After the Battle of Little Bighorn, more than 400 years later, Indian women used marrow-cracking mallets to pound the faces of the dead soldiers into pulp. Name the tribe, and I will tell you their preferred method of mutilation. The Cheyenne slashed their enemies' arms, the Arapaho split their enemies' noses, the Sioux slit their enemies' throats. Indian warfare was dominated by superstitions and traditions, and mutilations and scalps weren't the only way to prove yourself as a soldier. On the Great Plains, the Indians had a tradition called counting coup, and it involved demonstrating extreme bravery by touching or striking a living enemy warrior in battle with a hand, bow, whip, or special coup stick, and then escaping unharmed. This act was considered the highest honor in intertribal warfare, often more prestigious than killing from a distance because it required getting dangerously close, proving superior courage and skill while humiliating the opponent. As recently as World War II, an American Indian named Joe Medicine Crow completed the 4 traditional Crow war deeds. He counted coup by overpowering a German soldier in hand-to-hand combat. He captured an enemy's weapon by taking the soldier's rifle in the scuffle. He led a successful war party on a mission to capture explosives, and he stole his enemy's horses on a raid on an SS camp. And this made him eligible to be a war chief. Some of these traditions are admirable and impressive. No doubt Joe Medicine Crow was an American hero. But the ancient practice of scalping enemies and mutilating their bodies to deny them a place in the afterlife is, of course, appalling.
Okay, so all of this stuff that he's saying, it's actually pretty interesting because when you think about war prowess, the American Indians, they had it. Brutality, making sure that you conquer your enemy, you embarrass them, you shame them, they had it. But the problem with this is the religious tribalistic ideas or perspectives that came along with it. To me, that's the problem, because when you have to scalp people or skin them or beat their face into a pulp, into liquid, basically, just to appease some kind of religious tradition, that
they were feeding some demons. They were like,
for sure,
these rituals.
Rituals, man, sacrifice. Yeah.
I do wonder, like, how many of these. I mean, I can assume that they all had some kind of demonic influence, but I really wonder, like, the way that they did whatever they did, was it purposeful for the demonic entity that they were, I guess, serving, or that they or their God, you know what I mean? Their spiritual guys, whatever you want to call them. I wonder if they did it the way that they did for that purpose.
Probably, because you know, there's some people who you know, like, for example, the Bloods, whenever they kill somebody, or gangsters in general, they tattoo, you know, droplets of, I don't know if it's blood or droplets of liquid tears. Yeah, the tears. They tattoo it on their face, even if there's not a God that they're like, I'm tattooing this for this God. It's a ritualistic. And so, you know, them collecting the bones of their enemies, them stuffing their enemies.
Oh, you just actually reminded me of something. It doesn't matter if you know it or you're dedicating it or
That's
not.
the problem. Yeah.
Like, because there's 2 sides to this war, this spiritual battle, it's either you're serving God or serving the enemy. So you could be doing something that you think, oh, it's for a different reason, but really be doing it for the demonic kingdom or for a demonic entity that you don't even know about. But that demonic, you know, for example, if somebody doesn't know killing their own kid is actually a sacrifice to Moloch, they don't know that. They don't know that they're doing it and is dedicated to that God, because that is that is that sector of evil that demonic entity is in charge of, or that feeds off of, but you're doing it, but you don't know you're feeding that, but you are.
Yeah.
All of these things are feeding the demonic realm, whether they know it or not. If you wanted to do it or not, because you did it, you're feeding it.
You're
see what
part
I'm
of
saying?
it.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it doesn't really matter if you know or not.
Yeah. Like for example, during the slavery times, if you were a white person that would capture black people whenever you see them running and stuff, but you didn't necessarily believe these black people belong to these white people, they're just labeled as criminals because the law says that they're criminals. So I got to catch them, even though I don't believe in slavery. Like, even if you did catch those black people just for the sake of being a law-abiding citizen, you're still feeding into the system of slavery, even though you don't believe in slavery, because you're obeying the law. So just because you scalp people, and that's the thing, they were scalping to deter the people from moving forward in the afterlife, to going somewhere, I guess, more productive for the person. So it is ritualistic. Like, it doesn't even, they don't even have to serve a god physically. There are ideas behind the physical things that they do that speaks to an entity beyond them. And this whole video is interesting because a lot of people argue that the American Indians were these peaceful nature with peaceful and one with nature type of people. But when you look at the history of any peoples, like, you'll see that there are things that they do that is just human. That's the problem with when people say things like, we don't need a god to be able to live amongst each other, because someone is always going to find a god. Someone's perspective is always going to come from this thing or the self, or for the sake of science or logic or something like that. People always attach meaning to things to be able to act the way that they do. And that's the scary part about humans. Someone will find a reason to do something and you might not like that reason, but because you say there's no objective god or morality or ethics system or something, you have to accept the things that people choose to do, even if it harms you. Thank you guys for watching. If you've seen this full thing, drop your thoughts below. Let us know if this is something that helped you come to an understanding of the history between Americans and American Indians, and anything else that this thing point, even if you don't agree with what Matt Walsh is saying. Is he lying, or do you just not like what he's saying? Those are two completely different things. So drop your thoughts below. We'd appreciate you guys' subscription, subscribe, comment, and like. Catch you guys later. Peace.
Thanks for watching The Holy Duo.